Well, it's interesting that a pharmacy school would have one museum. It's almost unheard of for a pharmacy school to have two museums that roughly reflect pharmacy at two different points in time. The apothecary represented pharmacy from 1900 to 1950. The Gene White pharmacy reflected pharmacy from the 1950s forward. And so you essentially have two visual statements about what pharmacy was like. In the 1900s, pharmacy was largely a compounding industry, a small cottage industry, where pharmacists who were trained largely on the job prepared prescriptions to meet the needs of the patient that were largely formulas. The pharmacist had to compound almost everything. By the 1950s, things had changed. The pharmacists compounded very little. Most of what they sold was prepared for them by the pharmaceutical industry, and they basically just became salesmen. They answered questions when they were asked about the availability of a product, but when a patient asked them a question about how that product reflected improvements in their health, the standard answer from the pharmacist and from the code of ethics that pharmacists had at the time was, you're better off asking the physician that question. And so Gene White took exception to that. He felt like that the pharmacist had a better recognition of the problems the patient was dealing with, the socio-behavioral aspects of care. They had a better appreciation for what the drugs were supposed to do in the patient's body, and they were the best person to ask that question of. Unfortunately, his profession didn't agree, and a large number of physicians took exception, in a proprietary sense, to pharmacists answering questions about the physician's patients, not the pharmacist's patients. So Gene White basically stepped on a lot of toes. He went out and basically proposed the idea, which was radical at the time, that pharmacists were the best prepared to answer questions about the use of drug products in the patient's body. And he stuck with it. He was a very diplomatic person, but when it came to things that risked the health of his patients, his consumers, he was non-compromising. And he was very tenacious. He stuck with it, and when I acknowledged that I was coming here as the dean of the School of Pharmacy to start a new School of Pharmacy, the first phone call I got was from Gene White. And he said in this very interesting Eastern Shore, Virginia voice, "Hi, you probably don't know who I am. I'm Gene White." And I said, "I know who you are." I said, "Every person that came through graduate school with me was forced to read a book that you wrote about the changes in pharmacy." I said, "Sure, I know who you are." And he just kind of chuckled. And he said, "Well, I want to welcome you to Virginia." And I thought, this is really, really remarkable to have the person who changed the direction of pharmacy almost single-handedly calling and welcoming me to Virginia. And from that point on, we were best friends until his death about a year ago.